We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. Excited to have you here and really excited for you guys to hear from today's guest, one of my good friends, Chris Dreisbach. He's been on the show several times in the past, interviewed him on Felony Friday about his previous run-in with the criminal justice system. I've also done some shows with him, some roundtable type shows with other people from the addiction recovery sphere about talking about addiction, about recovery. We did, I think, one or two during the pandemic. We did a roundtable with people from recovery and police officers as well, talking about his initiative that he helped to start up called Second Chance PA. Today's show, we are digging in and talking with Chris about his success as an entrepreneur. Primarily, we're going to talk about that. He's done some incredible things, and you all are in for a treat. You're going to learn a lot from Chris today. Before we get to that, though, I want to remind you that you can support the Lions of Liberty a couple different ways. You can do so by joining the Lions of Liberty Pride. Of course, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. We have a Locals, lionsofliberty.locals.com. And we have a store with merchandise, lionsofliberty.store. You can check all of those out with the Patreon and the Locals. We have some different, actually, Locals, we don't have different tiers, I don't think. Patreon, we definitely have different tiers and different access points where you get different things at different levels to your whatever you desire. You can check it out, from being able to help produce a show to chipping in $5 a month to be able to access our bonus content and all that good stuff. At the $10 level, that's where we kick in, where you can get a discount on Run Your Mouth Coffee, which is a project that myself and my friend Ben Pangi founded to bring fresh roasted coffee to your doorstep and support uncensored speech. So check all that out. And I know we have some new listeners. We've been, obviously, if you've heard this on another podcast, we've been running some ads on some friends of ours podcasts. And if this is your first time here, or you've come back to hear what we've changed at Lions of Liberty, we're thankful for your listening, and we hope you hit that subscribe button and make this a regular stop on your podcast journey. We have a new show every Monday with Finding Freedom. This show every Wednesday with Mean Age Daydream with Brian McWilliams. Then every Friday, we got something. Meme Wars is one of our shows we run. Sometimes we'll run an episode of Libertarians and Living Rooms Drinking Liquor. Other times, Brian has some shows that he does, a show that he does called Hate Watch with Robbie the Fire Bernstein. So check those out. And I'm excited to get this interview to you today. All right, we are live to the Lions of Liberty Pride. I'm joined here by Chris Dreisbach. And for those of you, you can see him waving there if you're watching on video here, or if you're in the Pride right now. But I'll do a quick intro, Chris. Chris and I have known each other since 2018. I met Chris on the Dale Kearns for U.S. Senate run extravaganza. And Chris actually put together a bunch of events for Dale's campaign. It was a Addiction is Not a Crime tour. And we'll talk a little bit about that and reminisce. But Chris, welcome back to Finding Freedom.
Man, thank you so much, John. I don't think I was ever on Finding Freedom. I feel like I was on a bevy of other podcasts that you have or had.
I think you were on Felony Friday, and we talked about, we dug into that aspect, because you do have that in your past, which, I think that's important, as we'll talk about, for people to understand that you have that on your record with everything you have accomplished and are accomplishing. So, I'm not going to list through everything you're doing now. I'll let you do that. So Could you introduce yourself, to my audience? I guess the way I like to put it is, if you meet someone on the street or at an event and they say, Chris, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
That's a question I get a whole lot of times, and I feel like the answer is really dependent on where I am when somebody asks that, because there's so many different things that the world has thrown at me over the last 12 years of being in business, 13 years, however long it's been. I started out in 2010 where I opened my first company, which was a New Life Sober Living, where we had the first recovery community here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And, that thing just took off. It exploded. And thankfully, somewhere in the early days, I had a great mentor who told me I should start purchasing real estate instead of renting it. And that would set me up for my future. And I, for some strange reason, listened to that guy. And he further gave me a loan so that I could purchase my first property to help the individuals that we were serving, be available. And everybody at that time in my life said, Chris, you're an idiot. Don't take it. It's an 11% interest rate. You should never pay that much for money. And I thought, I didn't even think. I just said yes to the loan, and we went. And then we needed another house because the individuals who were living in the house were staying sober and doing well and gaining success. And I went and bought another house for more beds, and another house for more beds, and another house for more beds. And at some point in the middle of that, we started a construction company. So the folks in the house had some work to do, some new skills they could learn, really just kind of build them up a little bit further. And after a while, there were several other businesses kind of tossed in the middle. And eventually I gave away a New Life Sober Living, and we opened Blueprints for Addiction Recovery, which is my baby. It's my baby. That is a multi-site, state licensed drug and alcohol treatment operation here in Pennsylvania. And I'm currently sitting in my office at Blueprints right now talking to you. From there, I don't even know the chronology anymore, but there was a marketing company. There's a food truck named Dough Heads Waffles, some of the best, most creative, awesome, food truck food I've ever seen in my entire life. And there's a full service concessions group, which handles a variety of different municipal concessions, institutional concessions, shared commercial kitchen, catering, all sorts of different food service things. There's also Honeybee Cafe. We have a cafe in Manheim, Pennsylvania. We have Three Legacies Wrestling, the biggest, coolest professional wrestling company around, based here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, with my friend WWE alumni Ricardo Rodriguez. Then we've got Babaconda Productions, the production company where we're filming these awesome inspirational stories, different documentaries, docuseries that we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. I know I'm missing stuff. Archduke Investments, where we have my little brother and another guy doing affordable rentals for individuals with pasts and records. And we've got my real estate license, which is a crazy story in and of itself. And there's definitely more, but I think we'll just cut it right there. And suffice it to say, I'm doing enough stuff to keep me moderately busy.
You know that you're really stretching your limits when you have trouble listing everything you're doing. I'll say one thing, Chris. Be careful banging the table, because that does show up. Comes through, and I'll be able to edit it out in the podcast, but no. I'm not video savvy enough to edit it out of the video. So
understood. I'll keep my hands away.
I like to gesture too. I keep my gestures. I try to keep them in the air so I don't bang the table. So I do want to dig in and talk about a lot of these businesses. I want to talk about how you manage your time, how you select where to invest your time and money, and all that stuff. We'll do that, towards the second half of the show. I do want to just kind of talk, a little bit about your past, but with a recent tie. And I saw you, I'm not on TikTok, but I saw you post this video on Instagram recently, talking about a message you received from a woman that previously in your earlier life, when you were doing some irresponsible, not so nice things, you had a negative impact on. So I don't want to tell the story. It's your story. Can you please share really that story? And it's such a powerful story. So I'll just let you take it from here.
So I have to start by saying that I just joined TikTok like 11 days ago. Uh, and I really didn't want to, like I was, anti TikTok probably for no reason. Uh, but I did start it, and my good friend, filmmaker Andy Shankman, who's my partner in Babaconda Productions, he started making these crazy impressive videos, and they just needed to find the world. So TikTok seems to be a good place to do that because for some reason I have, 25,000 followers in 11 days. And, the videos that he's pumping out are powerful. They are impressive. And I don't even like to say I'm impressive on any day of the week, but Andy makes me look impressive. So the story, in my early days, I struggled with substance use disorder, addiction, and it led me to a lot of places. One of those places was burglarizing houses. Unfortunately, that was a part of my past and my history. I happened to get arrested for burglary in literally the worst possible way. It wasn't even like a good burglary story. It wasn't like I'm impressive and tough. I literally walked into my friend's house and I grabbed a hypodermic needle and I walked out. Something I'd done several times before to no, great struggle, because in 2005 or 2006, whatever year that was, you couldn't get a needle at a pharmacy like you can now. Back in the day, we had to find hypodermic instruments through fully illegal means, which was find a diabetic and give them $5, or find a dirty needle in the alley or the gutter or whatever it might have been. So this particular day, I think it might have been March 30th, 2006, if I had to guess. I walked into that house and that girl's mom was home because she had like an oral surgery or something going on that she wasn't at work. So that day when I walked into her house, it was one of those bi-level homes. So you can walk in the basement and then there's somebody upstairs. Yeah. And I walked in, I grabbed that needle and I walked out, and I probably scared the living crap out of that poor woman that day. And being in a real small town called Macungie, the Macungie police were there very, very, very rapidly. And they whisked me away to Lehigh County Prison. That's my burglary story. It's not very impressive to those who are burglars or those who have been in jail. It was pretty pathetic that I got caught that way. But I kind of left and I just hit the table again. But I left that day, with the police, and I went to jail. And being a poor kid with no knowledge, being 18, 19 years old, I really had no clue about the criminal justice system. So I said, yeah, I went in, I grabbed something, and I left. And that was sufficient legally for me to be a burglar because there was a person home and so on and so forth. So, I went through that process. I'm a felon for the rest of my life. And, I didn't really give it too much more thought other than, the millions of times I've had to talk about it. Never thinking that I'd hear from Brenda, the woman who was home that day, again, ever. I'm pretty sure there's a court order out there saying I should never hear from her again. But we were on our way to film a docuseries, actually with Spike Cohen, your good pal. And we were on our way to Myrtle Beach from Philadelphia. And we were on a painful layover at Reagan National Airport, R.I.P. Ronald Reagan. And we're at Reagan National Airport, and I get a Facebook message from Brenda, the sweet woman that I, terrorized accidentally that day. And it was just such an emotional moment because she sent me that message because she had seen the videos we were putting out and she was proud to know me. I mean, that's the level of power that recovery can have, because that woman who I thought I would never talk to again because I terrorized her, I just thought I'd never hear from her again. And I'm sitting there at that airport with my production crew and my friends and just people that I love. And I hear this message, I see this message, and we've been in touch ever since. She's so excited to see what I've been able to do over the course of a bunch of years. And man, there's just so much power in getting treatment and getting help and being able to live a life that you deserve to live.
That's so incredible. And I'm curious from your standpoint, Chris. I mean, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I mean, you know all you've accomplished. I mean, all the lives that you've touched. I'm curious. I mean, do you reflect on this and really step back and just take account for like the impact that you've had? Do you ever do that?
Sometimes. I mean, that we were headed down to Myrtle Beach on that trip, and when I got there, we had a whole night of filming and no seconds to really reflect. But thankfully, Andy, being a genius filmmaker that he was, started asking me questions about it while we were on the beach, filming for other reasons. And at that moment, it kind of struck me that, just everything in life is so beautiful. I mean, if you're aware enough, if you're self-aware enough to just capture those moments and take them to heart, I mean, there's not much cooler than that. I was able to inspire a woman I once terrorized. And at that moment on the beach, I felt that. I felt the power of that moment. And that is, again, on that video on TikTok and Instagram and, all over the place, that has, I don't even know, like 300,000 views. It's just silly to me to think about.
That's such a cool story. When you've done so many different things. I mean, from really, and it seems like your focus at the beginning, right, was on helping other people. You were in recovery. You wanted to help other people in recovery. And you've continued that, right, with like these businesses you're starting. The employees at your businesses, are most of them or all of them in recovery?
Many of them. I mean, I don't discriminate. I love people who didn't have to struggle too. I love people who struggled differently. And, a lot of my employees, a lot of my business partners, a lot of the people that I try and help elevate are in recovery. But, everybody struggles with something. Everybody's kind of felt certain feelings and being downtrodden and outcast and things of that nature. So, those feelings kind of apply to folks who do struggle with substance use disorder, and those feelings apply to a lot of normal people too, if you will. Mm-hmm. So, I'm just kind of equal opportunity helping folks, feel better, be better. Really, I'm just trying to exist.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing a good job and a unique job of it. I mean, I think it's cool. Like a lot of the businesses you start are like ones you wouldn't think a serial entrepreneur would start. You have the trading card business, right? You have this.
Forgot about that.
I want to talk about the wrestling. Is it a league that you founded or events? Because this is so unique and it's interesting. I don't know how. Maybe you can tell the story behind this or the backstory. But you've kind of had a connection into wrestling. I mean, I remember back on the Dale Kearns trail, you brought in Sean Waltman, aka the 1-2-3 Kid, aka X-Pac, who's just an awesome dude, and crazy. I mean, just crazy times that I'm meeting X-Pac, who I watched on TV, growing up, and I'm having lunch with him at a burger place in Pittsburgh, and he's just like a totally relaxed, laid-back guy. But so where did you get this like foot in the door with the wrestling community?
Well, I mean, I have been a lifelong wrestling fan. I'll happily and openly admit that. And when I was a kid, I wanted nothing more than to become a professional wrestler. So I went and trained at a school in Allentown, which is kind of a big wrestling hub where I grew up. And, I never really made it anywhere. I found cocaine and heroin to be a little bit more interesting than professional wrestling at some point, and it fell by the wayside. And when I entered recovery in 2007, I didn't really give it too many other thoughts until maybe 2011 or so. A local Lancaster Championship Wrestling was running down here, and I kind of got back my foot in the door with those guys and got involved in those shows until they shut down in 2015 or 2016. I've always loved wrestling, still do to this very day. And, I met X-Pac, Sean, when we went and did the town hall tour, or the Addiction Is Not a Crime tour, if you will. And we connected right away because Sean's a person in recovery. He's got a great heart. He's just incredible. I mean, there's no two ways about that. Through Sean, I then got to meet Bob, who works for the WWE's wellness program, which is the craziest thing ever, because the WWE will pay for treatment for their stars for the rest of their lives if they need it, whether they're working for the company or not, whether they work there for one day or not. They're helping people, and it's unbelievable. So he linked me
I'm
up
just
with their
going to
wellness
pause on
program.
that because
Go ahead.
that's incredibly unique, man. Because I know even like the NFL doesn't do anything like that. Even to get
Yeah.
like medical care in the NFL for, a period of time after you're done playing, I'm pretty sure you have to play for like 3 years before you'll get that. So that's remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, they have easily the most progressive, pretty incredible wellness program. And so I met Bob, the individual who kind of runs that, and developed a friendship with him. And, what happened one night was I never go on Twitter ever. And I went on Twitter randomly. And after we did our what the heck do you call it? Pandemic town hall or virtual town hall with
I forgot to
Xbox.
talk about those. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many different things. But after we did that, this guy, Ricardo Rodriguez or Jesus Rodriguez, was a former WWE guy, and he followed Blueprints, which is the only Twitter account that I have. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I never really heard of the guy, but, WWE clearly is into recovery, like him. That day, I was probably like on the toilet at 1:00 in the morning, or who even knows why I looked at Twitter. But I see, a tweet from this guy. It's like, I don't remember the exact verbiage, so forgive me, but it was like, hey, I fell, I'm struggling, I need help. So I reached out via Twitter message, and I said, hey, man, I don't know you, you don't know me. I don't remember what the heck
you
I
reached
actually
out right
said.
then at
I
1:00
reached
in the
out
morning. Just
at that moment because he was in need of help, and I didn't think he'd ever answer or anything. But a couple seconds later, he was like, yeah, man, I'm in this hospital in San Antonio, and I don't know how I got here. I was drunk and so on and so forth. We had a nice long chat, but basically I said, man, we'll do whatever I can for you. Come on up here. We'll scholarship you and get you into treatment and get your life back on track. Kind of like I would for most anybody who needed help. And it really set in course this train of circumstances that would bring him up here for treatment, to get him the help that he needed. And he decided to stick around, and we developed a bond and a friendship through recovery. And, we started Three Legacies Wrestling, which is his wrestling company here in Lancaster County. I'm just a small part of it.
That is so awesome. And so you guys had an event recently, right?
Yeah. On Saturday night, just 2 days ago.
Yeah, how did that go? And like, I know you said you're his, it's his thing, but like, I know that you're involved in promoting it and stuff. So like, how did it turn out? How did it come together?
And I'll tell you what, we had a completely sold out event, standing room only. Community members in Lancaster County came out strong on Saturday night. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was so electric. No other wrestling company in this area has come close to a sellout in years and years and years. So to be able to see Jesus, in his 11 months of recovery, build up to that level is something that just swells my heart. And it was so hard to not cry watching the beauty that Saturday night was.
How important, do you think something like that is for somebody in recovery to have, it doesn't have to be, a wrestling league, but to have something that they can pour themselves into? How important is that?
I'll often talk about finding your purpose, because if you live a life without purpose, what's the point? Where are you going? What are you doing? So a lot of times when I'm working with somebody new in recovery, or even kind of long in recovery, who's feeling a little bit slow or a little bit backed up, or maybe like they might backslide, it's really about finding purpose, kind of harnessing your passions and figuring out what it is that drives you to exist. Because if you find a life of purpose, there's really no reason to return to the way I used to be. Because I used to use heroin and other drugs to kind of quell the nightmare that was the internal life of Chris Dreisbach. And once I kind of launched out on this path of recovery, I really had no reason to go back to it, no even remote thought of going back to it, because life is so big and so beautiful, and there are so many people that need help, and so many people that can just benefit from you and your light and your vision. I mean, helping people find their passion is my number one goal.
That is so awesome. And I mean, I think that applies to to everybody, really finding that purpose. I mean, I know from my own perspective, when I feel like, I'm kind of feeling lost or like not knowing, if I'm doing the right thing, if you kind of take account for what you're putting your time into, are you making progress, like actual forward progress in what you're doing? I think a lot of the times the reason why people like maybe in like a corporate job per se, or something like that, doesn't have to be a corporate job. It could be any sort of job, a construction job or whatever, where you don't see the bigger picture of what you're putting your time into. You don't see it moving something forward, or you don't see it moving your personal life forward in a way. Just some sort of goal. I feel like that is almost like the secret to life, putting that together.
I would agree entirely, because there's a lot of different types of people too, and it took me a long time to come to the fact that not everybody thinks like I do, and I can't expect everybody to go completely nuts and work 80 hours a day and do all these things. So I've really come to terms over the last 5 or 6 years that there's just different types of people, and the person who prefers security over the uncertainty of entrepreneurship, there's nothing wrong with that person. It's a beautiful thing. As long as they're happy and they're living well, I love that. But for the crazy, adventurous nut job like me, that's where I'm at. I love the uncertainty. I love not knowing where the next thing's coming from. I love creating things out of thin air and watching other people create their dreams out of thin air. So those are the things that drive me and push me forward. So
speaking to that crazy nut job, those are your words, not mine. Serial entrepreneurship. I mean, you're juggling 100 different things, probably difficult to plan a day and stick to that plan, different things coming up. What types of things do you use? What types of tools do you use to be able to manage this much stuff? I mean,
well, John, I have it right here. I have this beautiful 8-year-old phone.
There you go.
And what I'll do is, this is a very simple trick if you're kind of new to being an entrepreneur, or if your brain thinks similarly to the way mine does, is I use this ancient calendar that you probably can't see, but it's a simple Google calendar. But if you can look at it, it's just completely jam-packed with stuff. And then if it goes in this calendar, that's where I appear. And if it's not in this calendar, I forget about it for the most part, because there's enough going on up here that I can't keep track of. If it's all in here, I don't forget it. So that is the most basic tool that I use to keep track of the madness of my day. And honestly, I just focus on what's coming up next and try and be 100% present in everything that I'm doing. Because if I'm focused on the 8 o'clock Zoom call I have after this, I'm not here and I'm not present with you. And then you're not getting what you deserve from me, which is my time and attention.
And that's tough to do. I can attest to that. As I just right before this podcast, I had work calls for my corporate job, and during those calls, I kind of had to, make sure I wasn't drifting off and thinking about this podcast, because I've been excited, to have the chance to talk to you. So that's easier said than done, I think. And I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's not all entrepreneurs definitely don't agree with this, because there are people like yourself, many of them, who put time into many different things. But it's been said that, I don't know if it's the easiest path, but a common path of entrepreneurs is to become obsessed with one thing and get really good at that, and make sure that that's profitable, and then you can move on to something else. Personally, my mind has never been able to work that way. I can't just have one thing. I have to have multiple things. I just wanted to get your input on that. Are you kind of built in a way where just having one thing, it wouldn't be enough? You kind of have to have multiple things on your plate?
I mean, I've always, even when I was using heroin, I would always have at least 2 or 3 jobs working at the same time, because I needed to find $10. And, I knew I wasn't going to be able to wait tables for very long, because they'd fire me because they'd realize I was, a strung out junkie. And so I had to have 2 or 3 of those running at all times. So it may or may not have set me up, in the position to be able to juggle multiple things, including my full-time job, which was finding heroin. I think honestly, in 2010, had you asked me, I would have told you I was obsessed with helping people in, this recovery house operation that I had. If you asked me in 2013 when we started the construction company, I probably would have told you a totally different thing. If you asked me in 2016, I would have told you I was 1,000% obsessed with and committed to building blueprints and going on with that. Truthfully, you just kind of grow and find what works for you, because there's so many different avenues that you can take. If your passion is singular in the sense where, I love making ice cream, so I'm going to be obsessed with making the best ice cream on earth. And that's it. That's my passion. That's what makes me float. And I think my passion has grown into something that is kind of helping other people achieve their entrepreneurial dreams. So it allows me to jump into a bevy of different industries without having to fully obsess myself with each individual industry. So I don't know if that made any sense, but everybody is so different, and there's really no blanket that you can toss over anything and just say, this will cover every person everywhere. But if you grow and find what you love and follow your passion, you can't go wrong.
So a couple more business questions for you.
Sure.
When do you know, or how do you evaluate when you need to either, walk away from a business, or either step back maybe and let someone else take the lead?
Well, a lot of times, personally, at the very least, I try not to do stuff I know I'm not good at. For example, in Blueprints, I have two of the absolute best executive level people on earth. And I'll call them out right now because, I love them and they love me. So I think I can pull this off. Ben and Jesse are my two executives. And Ben is an absolute wizard. He is the smartest human I've ever met in my entire life, hands down. I've never met a smarter person, never will meet a smarter person than Ben. He's tremendous, but his attention span is very short, and he gets distracted and he moves on to some other things, right? Most genius guy on earth, but has a tough time with, following through sometimes. Jesse may be slightly opposite. He doesn't claim to be a genius. He's just a good, hardworking, honest, awesome guy. But he is an organizational genius. So he will literally manage an entire 130-person company without a sweat. I mean, he makes it look easy. But if you ask him to write you a paragraph about something, he's not going to be there. He's not going to be able to do very well. So those two guys working together, they make like a super ultra mega human. And if you add me in there, I add probably something. But, you
get a super mega human with long hair then when they add you.
Yes. Yes. You have a really funny looking super ultra mega human. But yeah, I forgot where I was even going with that, but those guys.
Yeah, no, so you have to find. It sounds like what you're saying is you're finding people. Not only are you self-aware and understanding where you have maybe holes or areas where you're not, great at, but you then find those individuals as people on your team, or maybe you hire them who can fill those skill sets, right?
Yeah. So effectively, if you need a policy and procedure written, or a license to be created, or an impressive website to be built, or a novel quality level writing done, that's what Ben jumps into, and he is incredible at it. Jesse, organizationally, if you need something like that done, he's on fire with it. I'm okay at both of those things, but those guys are darn near perfect at them. So I let them handle the things that they're perfect at, while I handle the things that I'm acceptably decent at. And similarly in all the other companies, everybody has their own strengths and their own skill sets, and I let them be as good as they can be while I attempt to be as good as I can be. And when everybody's working together for a common goal, you're always going to come out on top. I don't see it fail very often.
Yeah, and you have been involved with multiple. Sounds like I don't know the legal structures you're in. It doesn't really matter, but partnership type agreements and where you have either one or two or three people involved in a business, or more than that. What are some secrets or tips for managing those types of relationships? Because that can get pretty complicated.
It gets extremely complicated because, again, everybody's different. Everybody's struggling with their own personal things. Everybody's working on their own, just everybody is so different. And a whole lot of partnerships really comes down to compromise and communication. Those two C's are totally essential, because if you're not able to compromise and you think you know the only way, you're destined for failure. Guaranteed, destined for it. Communication, obviously, if your partners don't know what you're thinking, how are they supposed to make decisions? How are they supposed to act accordingly? So communication and compromise are the two biggest things in partnerships that I would like to always talk about when I meet with my new partners, or if I'm interviewing a new business, or if somebody brings an idea to me. We really have to talk about how we're going to communicate. And if you think the only way is your way, I can't really move forward with those things.
So you talked a little bit there about evaluating new businesses, and you're involved in, like we talked about, many different businesses, from food trucks to pro wrestling. So in real estate and everything else. So when someone brings an idea to you, they bring a business plan to you, what's sort of your process? Are there certain industries that you just want to get involved in? Or what's your process for evaluating that?
I've got a really good story for you, and it's another one that I didn't mention earlier because my brain is very small and mostly fried at all times. But I had three people whose recovery journeys I've been a part of over the last decade. And, they kind of would struggle and do well, and then do well and do bad, and do well and do bad, and, so on and so forth. But these three individuals that I'm about to talk about all have a serious passion for art, creating art, selling art, and doing all this stuff. And I have zero passion for art, not even a little tiny bit. I can't draw a stick figure. It's pathetic. But these guys
with
came
you there.
to
I
me.
can't either.
Yes. These guys came to me with this idea to make an art collective, an all-inclusive, open art collective for struggling artists, for kind of disenfranchised artists. And I was so sold from the second I heard this plan, because I was sold on the people that were bringing it to me. And I think that's the biggest part of evaluating a business is, are the people passionate? Are the people committed? Are the people malleable and flexible enough to try different things and not feel like they have all the answers? And then obviously we kind of launch into different homework. We set up effectively what a normal business plan would look like, but we break it down in pieces to make sure the concept is viable, make sure it's solving some kind of problem, just kind of make sure it's going to work. Really have to look into our competitors and see who's already doing it, see if we should really fight for that same dollar. There's a whole lot of different things. And again, depending on the industry, that we have to look at. But I think the biggest things are the people, the passion, and are they willing to sacrifice to make their dreams work?
That's a great point. It really does come down to the people. And I love the example that you gave. And I forgot about that. I did see you post that on Instagram the other day. You just had an event was that the opening of the collective, or?
So that was the grand opening of this art collective. And again, I'm so new to the art world, and like everybody in that community has embraced me with open arms. And I'm just a big, goofy, non-artistic guy. And we had this grand opening, and I thought, we'll go down for a couple hours. There might be like 100 people through. We had thousands of people walking through this art collective. You could not even move. You couldn't breathe. It was unbelievable. Words can't really describe just how cool it is to watch people who were previously down and out step up and build something out of thin air, and then watch the community jump behind it. It was an unbelievable weekend, because that was the night before the wrestling event. And I got to watch four of the people that I love the most in this world succeed. And oh man, that's a high you can't get rid of right there.
That's incredible, man. That is absolutely incredible. So there's more to talk about. We're not done yet. And maybe, I mean, maybe the last one, or maybe it's not the last thing, but the next thing I want to talk about, which is something I'm really looking forward to, because I've been seeing you post little pieces of this on Instagram, and I'm sure you're posting it on TikTok too. But this new docuseries, and you mentioned that there's you did have a conversation with Spike Cohen. I think he's going to be a part of that in some capacity, one of the episodes maybe. Talk a little bit about what the plan for that is, and when people can expect it to be released for consumption.
Yeah, let me just start with the backstory on this one too, because in March of 2022, I think it was 2022. Forgive me if I have these dates wrong. A lot happens. I did a police training with the Lidditz Police, and I know you know about Second Chance PA and the criminal justice reform program that we have going here. It was a police training with Chief Ed Cunningham from the Elizabethtown Police and my other partner, Ben McCoy, the genius that was previously mentioned. And we do this police training for law enforcement so that they, have an understanding of the brain science of addiction and know what we're up against. And we talk about a continuum of care and how to help individuals go from a hopeless life to a life of purpose. And then we talk a little bit about my life and what can happen if an individual gets the treatment they need. So that particular night, Ed had asked a friend, Andy, to come film. So Andy and his wife, Pam, came and filmed this thing. And they were really friendly, nice people. So we exchanged business cards and, said, hey, let's stay in touch. And eventually, once Jesus moved up here, we had talked about doing a documentary, documenting his recovery journey and, seeing how that would go. And when I thought back to who would lead this documentary, I thought about Andy, because he was telling me about his passion for filmmaking and how he just loves to do this stuff. So I reached out to Andy, having not seen him in several months or many months, or who even knows how long it was. And I said, hey, what do you think about this crazy idea? You want to help me do this documentary on Jesus? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And so Babaconda Productions was basically born right there, because Andy, who has such a passion for filmmaking, dove right into this thing. He didn't ask questions about if we were going to get paid, how we were going to get. He said, let's do it. Let's bring this thing to the people because it's a great story. And I started to, as we were filming this documentary, I saw Andy's passion and I saw how much he loves filmmaking. So we had to turn it into a company. And as we were flying to Los Angeles to go meet Jesus's mom and see where he grew up, because he's from LA, Andy and I were, trapped on a bevy of planes, a variety of planes and a bunch of hotels. And we just started spitballing, what else would be interesting to film? Look at all these people at this airport. That person probably has a really cool story, and this person over here probably has a nice story, and that person over there probably has something interesting. And we ended up thinking, what the heck are we doing? Let's talk about inspirational recovery stories, because that's my wheelhouse. That's where I am. That's where my passion lies. I love seeing people recover and blow their lives up in the best ways possible. So we reached out to my friend Brandon Novak, who you may remember from Jackass fame and Viva La Bam and a bunch of those other, crazy shows that he used to do. He's a professional skateboarder, but he's also one of the most kind-hearted, just awesome individuals in recovery that I've ever gotten to meet. So we got to go down to Philadelphia and do an interview with him for episode 1 of Repurposed, which is the name of the docuseries. So we're effectively grabbing folks who used to live without purpose, and we're going to talk about them being repurposed and living a new life.
That's a great name, man. Incredible name.
Yeah, I thought so too. And, my girlfriend Jamie picked that name. I'll never take credit for naming anything because I'm bad at naming things. But no, it's great. We got to go see Brandon for episode 1, and then we flew down to Myrtle Beach to meet with Spike Cohen, the 2020 Libertarian vice presidential candidate, who also happens to be a person in recovery, who I connected with immediately as soon as we started talking. And he has a super different story than Brandon, but no less inspirational and no less incredible. And then we flew over to Nashville, Tennessee, where we met with Mike Miz, not the WWE Mike Miz, an artist, a musical artist in Nashville that I actually met in 2007 when I first got sober. And a couple of years ago, he moved to Nashville and signed a recording contract, and he's just killing it over there, making some of the best music around. I cannot wait to be able to bring you that episode because he plays some really cool, concerts. We got to film him in the studio working with a Grammy award-winning producer. There's just some incredible stuff. And we weren't even done on that trip because we went up to Charleston, West Virginia.
I know Charleston, West Virginia.
Charleston, West Virginia. It's a beautiful place, and the people are so friendly. But we went up to Charleston to meet with Paul Fletcher, who you may remember from the 2018 tour, the former Philadelphia Phillies pitcher, Paul Fletcher. Who
I do remember.
Tremendous recovery story. I know you remember hearing it several times, but the guy's got heart and passion. And, he's lived such an interesting life. So that's going to be our 4-part docuseries called Repurposed, hopefully streaming on Amazon in mid-2023 at some point. But feel free to follow me on all the social medias and everything. Stay in touch on that because it's going to be exciting.
That's awesome. That could very much blow up. I could see that really, really blowing up. So definitely keep an eye on that. So you mentioned it a little bit there in passing, and your previous appearances on this show, we talked about a more in-depth Second Chance PA. But I just wanted to get an update on that. And for those listening to this who have never heard of it, it is a really cool, I don't know what you would call it, initiative, collaboration that you have with law enforcement and the recovery community. So could you kind of share just real quickly, what is it and what's happening now with Second Chance PA?
Yeah, so Second Chance PA is an initiative that we at Blueprints started in conjunction with 2 small police departments here in Lancaster County in 2018. It's a pre-arrest diversion program, effectively, where we send certified recovery specialists on scene with law enforcement at the individual's moment of crisis. The officer then has the opportunity to forego charging the person if they agree to enter treatment right away. Then from there, the certified recovery specialist will walk with the individual through their process of recovery, all the while keeping the officer informed with their permission. And the officer then has the opportunity to stay involved in their recovery process and send awesome little messages like, hey, I see you're doing good, man. Keep it up. And as a person who's only ever been questionably treated by law enforcement or even borderline abused by law enforcement, there's nothing more inspiring than to see the light in somebody's eyes when they recognize that their former enemy is actually their friend and invested in their health process. So
I think you might have more to say there. I just want to jump in. Just from the perspective of, someone like myself being in the libertarian community, and you see, obviously, there's a lot of police abuse that happens, a lot of not good things, and probably rightfully so. There is a perspective from libertarian against the cops, really, really blaming cops for a lot of this, which, I'm not saying cops are not at fault, but I think it's so important the way that this collaboration, this initiative is set up, that it really brings that community aspect back into policing. Instead of police looking at, someone that they run across on the street who's, really at the worst point in their life, instead of just looking at them as just a number and throwing them in prison, there's a relationship that has a potential to be formed, and then an investment where that police officer now is, has the capability to check in. And if this took off across the country, I think this is one of the answers to, what we're dealing with the opioid epidemic. And I'm curious what kind of, curiosity or inquiries you get from, or do you get any from, police forces outside of Pennsylvania kind of wanting to pick your brain on Second Chance PA?
Well, we get an unbelievable number of people looking to kick tires and think about the idea of diversion and, trying to figure out what lightning in a bottle we caught that's made us so successful. And I think a lot of it just comes down to heart and caring and hiring the right people and making sure that the responders that go out with law enforcement have the tools and the ability to connect with an individual and get them the help that they need at that moment of crisis, which could be a rather stressful situation. I mean, I've responded to the side of highways when there's cars whipping by at 100, whatever miles an hour, and I'm trying to stay focused with this individual in crisis. It's not easy. So I think a lot of that is so multifold, Second Chance PA, because there's numerous parts where we break down the stigma that exists between individuals struggling with addiction and law enforcement, because I, for the longest time in my life, thought the police were my mortal enemy, period, point blank. If you wore a badge, I hated you. That's it. And the reality of the situation is, much like every other industry, policing has good people and policing has really bad people. The really bad people are the ones we hear about most often, and they do exist. I will be the first to admit it. There are many law enforcement officers that I would not personally endorse. But conversely, there are many, many law enforcement officers that are in it for the right reason, that want to impact their community and positively help the lives of people that they serve. So just like I could say not all podcast hosts are the greatest people in the world, I can fully endorse John Odermatt as a podcast host because I know he's a great person. So, there's good and bad with everything. And I think if you feed the negative, you get the negative. And if you feed the positive, you get the positive results.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you've done, and really the collaboration has done with Second Chance PA, is, instead of, as libertarians, often we get frustrated and we look at things like, well, if we just totally get rid of this system, we get rid of police and we bring in, private policing, and, we make drugs legal and make it be able to be so they can get tested, and all of these things that really just are not going to happen. Instead of just looking at what do we have right now with the current situation, the current structure of society, of the community we live in, how can we function better where we are right now? And I think this is just a highlight of how you do that. And I just hope that others, see this and use it as a template to build. So
yeah, I can see the fun, aluminum foil hat wearing ideas, like we could just get rid of the whole government and everything's going to be fine, and we get rid of the police and everything's going to be fine. But I totally love the idea that if my mom and dad are struggling, that there's going to be a safety net for them. I don't mind paying 40% of my income to the federal government so we can make that happen. That was sarcasm. I hate paying 40% of my income to the federal government.
Because we're never going to see it again.
Exactly. But I do love the idea that safety nets exist for people, because I know the people that I love, I would never want to see struggle. I would never want to see them harmed or hurt in any way, shape, or form. And there's a lot of folks that aren't blessed like I've been blessed. So if my parents run into a struggle, I have a little bit of money saved up, I can help them. But think about me 15 years ago. If my parents were struggling, I wouldn't have been able to step in and do anything. So I'm thankful that there's a safety net. It's not a very popular libertarian thing to think about, but it's a very real human thing that has to be thought of. Could it be operated much more efficiently? Absolutely, yes. But, the reality is we can't get rid of the police. The police are here to stay. The police can come into my office right now and take me out and put me in a cage again if they really wanted to.
And they might when they see that TikTok video of that woman contacting you.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I violated the court order by speaking with her. But what can we do to proactively work with them? What can we do to offer them better training, give them more information, let them know what it is we're actually up against, and show them that the people that they're seeing over and over and over and over again aren't actually bad people. They're just sick people who can be treated, and when treated can go on to do incredible things like I've been able to do. And that's how we start to make changes, small community by small community. We could show success rates well north of 70%, like Second Chance PA has been able to show. I really think if we can implement that in other counties in Pennsylvania, that we would see the same results. We'd see communities restored. We'd see the police looked on as friends instead of our mortal enemies. I mean, there's so much ripple effect that can occur positively from treating humans like humans instead of tossing them in cages.
It's a novel idea, treating humans like humans. I like
Weird.
it.
Weird
That
thought, but
could be a political slogan. I'm going to treat humans like humans.
it might not even be popular right now, because even if you look on my TikTok about, I forget which video it was on there, but I was talking about Second Chance, probably just a brief intro to Second Chance, and the comments underneath the thing are like, "Are you closing the southern border?" It's like, no. Like, I have nothing against Maryland. I love Maryland people. Like, why would we not let them come to Pennsylvania?
We could talk about the eastern border, though. I mean, closing up New Jersey, maybe we could do that. But
we could talk about that. But I also love people in New Jersey. So, but it's just you kind of like
the kid with New Jersey. I love the people in New Jersey. I just don't want to go there, really.
Fair enough. I won't comment on that. But really, politically, things are pretty bonkers right now as far as that all goes. And I don't care if you're a libertarian, a Green Party, a Purple Party, a Constitution Party, a Democrat, a Republican. If you got a good heart and a good mind and you want to serve the community, I'll work with you. We have a completely nonpartisan group of individuals working on Second Chance to make sure that the members of our community are served and treated with dignity and respect. And I don't think it has to be a political issue, because I'll stand with a hardcore super liberal Democrat in the same room as our, very Republican county commissioners. And every single one of those folks have the same thing in mind: is how do we serve our community? How do we help people get better? What can we do to make the world a better place? So I think the infighting, the battling, it's completely pointless if we all could just work together and come up with solutions. This world would be a fantastic place, wouldn't it?
So, speaking of politics, is there a political future for Chris Dreisbach? And I say that, well, I mean, you do have the felony on your record, but I know, at least in Pennsylvania, that's a Pennsylvania law where felons can't hold, I think, a local office, which is being challenged by a previous guest on my show, Mayor Kate. I'm not sure where that stands as of today, but you can run for Congress, I believe, in Pennsylvania, or even Senate in Pennsylvania, right? With a felony on your record. So is that something that you think you would do at some point? Could be years in the future, but what do you think about that?
John, 10 years ago, if you'd asked me if I'd be running a company with 100 plus employees and if I would have, 8 or 9 other companies going, I would have told you absolutely not. That's nuts. No way I'm ever going to do that or get there. So I don't really make real conjecture about the future. I think if the time makes sense and the issues make enough sense and I could impact those issues moving forward, maybe I would. But I'll tell you what, Washington sure ain't ready for a long-haired nut job like me. Sure ain't.
I don't know if you could. I would pay a lot of money to see you on a debate stage with John Fetterman. That would,
that would be a blast, because we'd be like, huh? What? I mean, just collectively, we'd need like a third person to make sure we'd stay on the rails. So we'd have to invite Lou Barletta or somebody that, just.
Lou Barletta. I forgot about.
Please notice, I'm joking. Lou Barletta, I've met him. He's a nice man.
I'm sure he is. I did want to bring up one more thing, which I think is important. We talk about on finding freedom. We talk about business. We talk about spirituality. We talk about health. And I think it's important to highlight, with you doing all of this other stuff in your life, helping other people, growing businesses, you've also, worked on your own health, and you've lost significant weight. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's just as important as anything else.
You're not wrong. And a couple of years ago, I would have argued with you. I did argue with you. I said, I can keep eating McDonald's and keep, drinking 100 Red Bulls a day, and I'll be fine, because I'm an invincible 33-year-old or whatever the heck I was when we met. And, last year, 2 years ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I hit 371 pounds. And, I'm 6'5", so it's not nearly as bad as it sounds. But I was very unhealthy. I was definitely obese and sluggish and not feeling very well. And I had some real chest pains one night. And I kind of thought maybe that was going to be the end. I went to seek a physician's advice, and he was like, dude, you're 370 pounds. Maybe we should look into decreasing that a little bit. And I thought, yeah, but like I've tried a million times and a million diets and I've always been big, so like I was confident that I wouldn't have the ability to lose weight anyway. So he said, like, how about you just start making some little changes? And, with the help of my girlfriend and a bunch of other people around me, I was able to start eating a little bit healthier. I stopped eating 10,000 calories at McDonald's at 2:00 in the morning, since the only time I have available to eat. I just made very small incremental changes in my life. And what started happening was my weight would decrease, my weight would decrease, and my weight would decrease. And I didn't really believe that any of it was long lasting, because I'd lost 20 pounds here, 20 pounds there. I'd fluctuated between 210 at my heroin weight and 370. And I never thought it would be a thing. But, today, 295 pounds, and I haven't had chest pain in a long time. And I'll tell you what, I'm slightly more energetic, even though it may not look like it. I feel a whole lot better physically. My knees still hurt. My back still hurts from the wrestling days. But man, I got to tell you, just making those incremental changes and putting in the work, because I didn't believe that it would work. 0% of me believed that I could thin out at all. And I put in the work and I got the result. So I'm fairly confident that anybody can do that if I can do that, because I'm definitely not that special.
I think it's so interesting. I think this is common with me in different parts of my life. Like you're super successful in business, you're building companies, and you're like, oh, this is no problem, I can do this. But losing weight, what? I can't make these changes. I can't change the way I eat. It's so funny how we put up these walls and what we can and can't do. And when you start to knock them down, you're like, what was that? Where'd that come from?
But it's so hard in the moment. When you're in the moment, it looks so insurmountable, and it looks like something you can't do. And you can kind of apply that to any major problem that you occur in your life. Starting a business, it looks huge and daunting and terrifying. But when you start to break it down chunk by chunk, piece by piece, and you do little by little, you see something grow and you see it build. Just like when you start eating a little bit better, or maybe exercising, which I don't do all that much, you start to see the weight drop a little bit. And you're like, maybe this is sort of real. But even if you don't feed that, you just keep going and you get those results and you see them and you feel them. But the key is to just start. Even if you don't start well or start right, just start and wait for the results. I mean, start and put the work in. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I would never have talked about 3 years ago. But I can say right now that you were correct 3 to 5 years ago when we were talking. I'll eat my words. I could not continue to live like that.
Well, I'm glad to see that you've made a drastic change and you're seeing drastic results. So I'm really happy for you, man.
Yeah.
And I think we haven't talked about everything, but we're about out of time, and I need to eat dinner and see my wife and daughter, who I haven't seen all day. But before we do that, I want you to plug. I don't know if you want to plug everything, because it's a lot, but I can plug everything on our show notes page. But just give some links and ways for people to find more stuff about you.
Oh man, I feel like this hour has flown by so fast. Like getting to do this with a friend is so easy, because I feel like we could talk for 10 more hours and not even cover half of what we should. But really, if you want to follow me on Facebook, I'm Christopher Dreisbach on Facebook. Some reason on Instagram, because I started it with my real estate career, I'm just Chris Dreisbach. And then back to all the other ones, I'm Christopher Dreisbach on everything else. So give me a follow on the TikTok, not the Twitter, because I'm not on that one, but all the other ones, Instagram, Facebook, and you can kind of keep abreast of the madness that is my life from there. And you can kind of find those links to all these different businesses that we're operating, that are giving other people opportunities to become entrepreneurs. And like, comment, share stuff. It really helps the folks that we're building, just like Jesus, who got to see an entire community show out for him this Saturday. Just be a part of that. Share these ideas, that criminal justice reform. Talk to your elected officials and let them know that you're dissatisfied with the way we're treating humans, and that there is a better way. And there's so many different ways you can follow me, but those are the easiest ways. And I would love to hear from any of you. If you have ideas, you just want to tell me I'm funny looking, doesn't matter. I love hearing from everybody, and I love making new friends, and I really just appreciate the opportunity to come talk with you, John.
Yeah, this has been great. And this hour has flown by. And it's honestly a pleasure on my end to be able to highlight someone like yourself who's, doing just great things in this world. And honestly, I cannot wait to see, when we talk again, we'll probably talk again before 5 years from now. But when we talk again in 5 years or 10 years and do another interview, I'm excited to see where you are and what's going on in your life. So Chris, thanks for coming on the show, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, John.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Chris Dreisbach. I'm sure it did not disappoint. Please go ahead and share this podcast around. You can share it if you're listening on the Lions of Liberty Network feed. You should know there's also a Finding Freedom feed exclusive, which you can subscribe to, listen on that. But it's a good thing, I think, to share with new people, to reach out with. If you don't want to share the whole Lions of Liberty feed with someone and you just want to share one of my interviews, sharing it from Finding Freedom is something that a lot of people do. You can find that feed, Finding Freedom, by just searching Finding Freedom. And if it doesn't come up with that, you can put my name in there, John Odermatt, and it'll surely come up on any podcasting app. And I would appreciate if you subscribe to it as well and leave me a 5-star rating and a nice little review. And if you leave a nice review, I might even read it on this very show. So there is that. And that's all I have. That's all I have for today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hopefully you've subscribed already, or you're thinking about it. If you're thinking about it, just do it. But I will see you all next week. Everyone have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.